بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. نويت تعلم وتعليم وتذكر والتذكير ونفي إفادة استفادة وحث التماس بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ودعاء إلى هدى ودلالة على خير اتباع الكلام وطاعته وقرب ثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Jazakallah khair for everyone for joining us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to accept your fast and your amal salih. May He please make us of those who are shown mercy and forgiven in this life and the next. Inshallah ta'ala, I wanted to look at a statement, still looking at the work Softening of the Heart from Imam Ibn Al-Mubārak, rahimahullah ta'ala, wa nafa'na bih, in which he relates from Abu Ishaq, and he said that a man of the Abdul Qais was told in his illness, Al-Sina, Qala. So he was mentioning that that this particular man from the Abdul Qais was told in his illness, counsel me, instruct us. And then he said, Qala Adartukum sofa. Did I caution you? I warn you about sofa. And so anyone that may be familiar with the Arabic language, you would know that sofa is actually one of the signs in Arabic language that indicates that the word that's going to come after it is a fi'l, is a verb, but also what it does is that it takes the verb, not to make this an Arabic grammar course, but it takes the verb that is a fi'l mudari'. A fi'l mudari' is a present tense verb. However, a fi'l mudari' is not just a present tense verb, but it can also be a future tense. So if I say اذهبوا, that in its somewhat default meaning has the sense that I am going. However, it can also have the meaning as I will be going. However, if I add sofa to it, then that definitively becomes I will be going, meaning that it's going to be something I'm doing in the future. And generally speaking, it's going to be something in the far future. And so what he means here by I counsel you against sofa, or I counsel you about sofa, is this aspect of putting things off. Meaning that the shaitan, as they say, the shaitan will allow you to make all the lofty intentions that you want. That, he'll allow you to make all the lofty intentions that you can think of, as long as it's for sofa. As long as it's for sometime in the future. That, tomorrow I'll start exercising. Tomorrow I'll start reading more Quran. Tomorrow I'll make up my prayers. Tomorrow I'll make up my fast. Tomorrow I'll do such and such. Tomorrow I'll do such and such. The shaitan will allow you to make all the lofty intentions that you want, as long as it's sofa, as long as it's for something in the future. And so what this is a reminder of is that we should be very cautious in regards to making plans for the future in the situation of things that we are capable of doing in the present. Meaning that if it's something that we can act, because there are certain things that we're not going to be able to do exactly at the time that we think to do it. For example, I plan, a person makes the intention to go to Hajj. They're not going to be physically able to go until the Hajj season actually comes about. But, for example, they can start putting in the steps. So, for example, they can put the down payment for the Hajj package that they're going to go with, or whatever the case may be. But it's just to say that there are some things that are going to have to wait until sofa, meaning that we're not going to be able to do them immediately because there's some type of barrier that is beyond our control. But those things that are within our control, that don't have a barrier, we're just saying that, I just don't feel like doing it now, I'm going to do it tomorrow. He's saying that I warn you against that. And the reason why that is that, as some of the sayings in go, is that tomorrow never comes. Because every day we keep saying tomorrow, 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 to the point that it doesn't come. And again, that is one of the things that the shaitan wants. And so the reason why I'm mentioning this particular statement as a reminder for ourselves is that in the month of Ramadan in particular, we don't want to make it a situation where we say sofa, tomorrow. Because in particular with the month of Ramadan, is that this is a limited period. That Ramadan is only a matter of 29 or 30 days. And right now, we're already outside of 7 of those days, meaning that a complete 7 days have already gone past. We're right now in the 8th day. And the thing is that we don't know if we're going to even live to see the end of this day, let alone what is going to be the case tomorrow or next year or 2 years or 10 years down the line. And so it's one of those things where we want to take advantage of the moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. That the ideal situation of the person that's trying to tread the spiritual path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that their thought pattern is that I want to maximize my moment. Meaning that whatever moment I'm in, I want to maximize the benefit. And when we say maximize the benefit, it's not coming from the standpoint of dunya, though dunya might get incorporated into it. But that's not the overarching goal. The overarching goal is the akhirah. That my overarching goal is what is going to give me my best relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That at this moment, what is the best thing that I could be doing that is going to better my relationship with Allah? That is what is ultimately the state and ultimately, hopefully, the station that we want to come to, where our thinking becomes like that. That in every given moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with, that's what we want to be thinking. Because as Hassan al-Basri has mentioned to us, is that every breath that we take is a decrease of our life. Or he said something to the similar. That if we look at our lives, that we can actually say about our lives that our lives are nothing but a number of breaths. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's given us a finite number of breaths that we're going to take in this life, and then once that number is reached, khalas. The angel of death comes and he doesn't ask. That death is going to come to us and it's not going to give us a choice. Malak al-Maut, the angel of death, he's not going to say, Tariq, I've come to take your soul. Do you want me to come back next week? Or would you want me to give you another 2-3 years? Or no. The only ones that the angel of death used to ask were the prophets, the Anbiya, out of adab. But we're not going to be amongst the prophets. And so that means that when our time comes, that's it. And we can't come back and do a retake. We can't come back and say, let me do it again. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of this reality. He reminds us of the people who are going to stand before Him and say, Ya Allah, let us be returned so that we can do good in the earth. We're not going to have that opportunity. And so the benefit for us is that when we have these reminders, they are inspirations for us to take advantage of the little bit of time that we have. Because the ultimate reality of things is that really it's a little bit of time. And this is why you have the likes of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu mentioning or comparing this life to a dream. Because when we have our dreams, we'll have dreams sometimes when it can seem like we're fully immersed in the dream, like this is extremely real. That sometimes we wake up in a state of fear, sometimes we wake up in a state of sadness because we were so happy in the dream and then we realize that it was a dream, or whatever the case may be in terms of our dreams. But when we're in the dream, it feels so real. It feels like we're right there in that moment. But then we wake up and we're back to reality, whatever that reality is. So the reason why Ali ibn Abi Talib had mentioned about this life being like that is because just like the time that we're in a dream, it can seem so real, But in comparison to our real lives, it's only a short period of time that we're in that dream, is the same way that this life is compared to the akhirah. Because if you were to do the mathematical equation, what is 100 over infinity? And of course, anyone that is quickly going to do the math, you know that anything over infinity is going to be zero. So that even if a person lives to be 100 years old, in comparison to the next life, it's nothing. This is why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions about people who will be asked about how long they stayed in the earth, they'll say things like, Ya yawmin or ba'da yawm, that we were only there for a day or part of a day. That, for example, if I were to ask those who may be listening right now, however old they are, whether they be in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their teens, whatever the case may be, if I were to ask many of you, maybe not all of you, but if I asked many of you, I would assume that if I'd asked you, does it feel like you've lived that long? And many of you will probably say no. I know for my reality, it doesn't seem like that. It's almost amazing to me that I'm as old as I am. Because it's like, I can remember being in elementary school. I can remember being in preschool and so on and so forth. I can remember when I was looking at people and I remember at a time where I thought someone who was 21 or 22 or 23, I thought that was old. And now working at a university, I look at 22 and 23-year-olds, I'm like, these are still kids. And so again, the reality of our situation, the reality of our situation is that we don't have that much time. And our time is precious. It's the most precious gift that we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one of the reasons everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by in the Quran is significant. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one that can swear by anything, and one of the things that He swears by is time. Wal asr. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he used to say that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if the only surah, the only chapter that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed was Surah Asr, that would have been sufficient. And for many of us, like for example, if we converted to Islam, or if we recommitted to Islam, or whatever our situation is, or if we were born to Muslim parents and we went to Islamic school, or whatever our situation was, but for many of us, when we were first learning the Quran, Surah Asr was probably one of the first surahs that we learned, because it's one of the shortest chapters. And so because of that, we don't necessarily look at how much meaning is in Surah Asr. But Imam Shafi'i, the great Imam, the great Faqih, he's saying that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only revealed just that chapter, it would have been enough. The Sahaba used to consider it to be so important that usually when they used to leave their gatherings, they used to leave reciting Surah Asr to be a reminder for all of them. And the beginning of Surah Asr is what? What Asr? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's swearing by time, verily by time. That time is something that is very significant. Time is something that you can never get back. For many of us, we probably have moments in our lives that we wish we can go back and redo it. I wish I could go back and not say that thing. I wish I could go back and not do that thing. I wish I could go back with what I know now so I can react differently because of that situation and so on and so forth. As the saying goes, hindsight is always 20/20. But the reality of it is that a time machine does not exist. We can't go back and redo things. And so because that's our reality, and then the opposite is also true. We can't go forward and look to see what's going to happen in the future. We can't go forward and get to that point that we're anticipating, that result that we're looking forward to happen. So that means what? That means all we have is our moment. And so it goes back to what I initially said earlier, is what is the most beneficial thing that I could be doing in this moment. Not what my nafs wants. Because the nafs, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, Inna nasada amarati bisu, that verily the soul, the ego, is going to incline towards evilness. So when we say nafs in this regards, we're talking about the lower self, the ego, that which our desires comes from. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already informed us of that reality, that our nafs is going to incline towards evilness until we're able to train it. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions different types of nufus. He mentions different types of nafs, or the self, in the Quran. The lowest level, the first level, is the one that we just mentioned, the nafs al-ammara bisu, the ego that commands the evil. And for the most part, this is the default for all of us, is that we have different desires that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, and we incline towards those things. And our job as believers, as mu'mins, inshallah ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst the mu'mineen, is that we're supposed to upgrade ourselves to the next type of nafs, which is the nafs al-lawwama. And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Qiyamah. And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also swears by. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Qiyamah, La uqsimu bi yawm al-qiyamah, La uqsimu bi nafs al-lawwama. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He swears by the nafs al-lawwama. And what is the nafs al-lawwama? The nafs al-lawwama is the self-reproaching nafs. That is the nafs that starts to recognize its faults, starts to recognize those desires that it has that are not in line with what the Prophet ﷺ has brought, and they start working on it. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the sound narration, hadith al-sahih, or at least Hasan, that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, La yu'minu ahadakum. The Prophet ﷺ has many different ahadith where he begins by saying this. And one of the reasons why he says this is to get our attention. That the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, La yu'minu ahadakum. None of you, if we were to take it in a literal translation of it, is basically saying none of you believe. La yu'minu ahadakum hatta. None of you believe until. But what the ulama, they explain to us is that when the Prophet ﷺ, he says this, he says, La yu'minu ahadakum, it means that none of you have perfected your iman. None of you have perfected your belief. Meaning that we still have deficiencies in our beliefs until we fulfill whatever the condition that the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning. Like I said, the Prophet ﷺ has many different hadith where he mentions this. So in this particular hadith that I'm referencing, the Prophet ﷺ says what? La yu'minu ahadakum hatta yakuna hawa yattabi'u bima jittu bih. That none of you truly believes until his desires, hatta hawahu, until his desires, yattabi'u, follow bima jittu bih, what I have brought. So that until our desires are in alignment with what the Prophet ﷺ brought and what the Prophet ﷺ bring. Ultimately, the Prophet ﷺ, he brought the Quran and the Sunnah. He is the messenger who brought us the Quran, and in addition to that, he brought us his Sunnah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Ati Allah wa ati Rasul. Obey Allah and obey the messenger. So he brought us the Quran, and he also brought us his Sunnah. So until our desires in alignment with that, we're deficient. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in mentioning the aspect of the nafs al-lawwama, he's saying that when we allow ourselves to raise to this state, that it may not be that I have fully trained my desires to be in alignment with what the Messenger of Allah has brought. However, I recognize those areas where I'm deficient and I'm working on it. I'm not satisfied with it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by that soul. And we said before that everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by is something great. So that means that at least if we're at that level, we're at the level of something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers to be great. And so this is not a small matter. That as long as I'm not content with desires that I have that go against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have informed me of, that is actually a sign of iman. That as long as I'm not content with it, that's a sign of iman. It means that I still have some work to do to perfect myself, but it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still pleased with. that I'm working on it, that I see it, I understand it, I recognize it, and I'm putting in some type of effort to correct it. Now that may come easily, that may come difficult, that may come quickly, that may come in a long period of time. But at least at the heart level, then I'm not content with it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions the last type of nafs, the nafs al-mutma'inna. And this is what's found in Surah Al-Fajr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha an-nafs mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan maradiyya. That, oh you tranquil soul. Because essentially that's what the nafs al-maradiyya is. That rida, that has the connotation of good pleasure, please. Irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan maradiyya. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, return to your Lord pleased and well pleased. Irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan. That you'll be pleased, maradiyya. And he will be pleased with you. And this is why we say is that everyone that's looking for pleasure, everyone that's looking for tranquility, everyone that's looking for happiness and so on and so forth, in any aspect of this dunya is always going to be disappointed. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already told us what the path of true pleasure is. The path of true pleasure is never going to lie in anything in this dunya. And on a basic logical perspective, the reason why that is because everything in this dunya is temporary. So if you find pleasure in your children, you find pleasure in your spouse, you find pleasure in your brother, you find pleasure in your sister, you find pleasure in your friends, you find pleasure in your work, whatever it is. And it's not to say that you can't find pleasure in it. Muhammad, stop it. Leave that stuff alone. And it's not to say that you shouldn't find pleasure in certain things in this, or that you can't find pleasure in certain things in the dunya, but that should not be your source of pleasure. Your source of pleasure should be your relationship with Allah. And how do you increase in your relationship with Allah? You take advantage of your time. That whenever you have time, you try to do those things that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in those moments. So as one of our teachers would say, and some of you have probably heard me say this before, but this is a deen where things need to be repeated often, is that time is not something you kill, time is something you give life to. You know, in English, we have that saying like, I'm just killing time. Oh, what are you doing? I'm just killing time. Meaning that I don't have anything, quote unquote, to do in this time, so I'm just doing something just to hopefully make the time go by fast. From a believer's standpoint, we should come to the point of seeing or feeling or recognizing of how ludicrous that type of statement is. You're killing time, meaning you're trying to speed up your death. Ultimately, what that means, that I'm trying to do something that's just going to make my death come quicker without having any benefit. Wala hawla wala quwwata illa billah. Whereas, as we mentioned before, as Hasan al-Basri would say, we're nothing but breaths. We're nothing but time. I've mentioned this before, but again, I'll mention it again. I highly recommend anyone to get the book, The Value of Time. And I mean the Islamic book, because I think there's a secular type of book with the same title. But there's an Islamic book called The Value of Time. I believe it was written by Ali Juma, but I could be mistaken. But in any case, the title of the book is called The Value of Time. And so I would recommend anyone to purchase that book, because it mentions it's Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda. So Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda is the author of the book, but what it is that it's a reference of it's a reference for the is a reference for different statements of the Salihin of the value of time. So Sister Mina just placed the link in the chat for Mecca Books that has it, but it's a book that it mentions different statements of the Salihin about the value of time and different things that the Salihin would actually do in order to maximize their time. Now, one caveat that I'll put here is that some of the things that, if a person is going to get that book, some of the things in there, you have to place it in a particular context, because some of those things were like exceptions that certain ulama would do, because they were ulama that really knew the law and so on and so forth. So they would kind of like go to the limits of what will be considered to be permissible within a sacred law, but it's not something that you would necessarily do as an everyday person. So for example, I'll mention like in one of the narrations that's mentioned, it mentions about one of the shuyukh who, in order to keep himself up at night so that he could continue his studies, is that he used to go and sit at the edge of a cliff and do his studies. And the reason why he did that, because he knew that by sitting at the edge of a cliff doing his studies, is that if he got tired and he fell asleep, he would fall to his death. So it would help keep him up. Now the thing is, like, you don't do that. So take it more from the standpoint of like how he valued time. And then there's other aspects to it as well, is because your body still has a right upon you. So the thing is that, again, some of the things have to be taken, not as being something that we literally would try to enact ourselves, but it is a good reference to be reminded of the importance of making sure that we take care of our time. That we're not saying just sofa to the different things that we can do in our life. So for example, if we have the opportunity to give in sadaqah, we have the opportunity to give in charity, and we talked about some aspects of charity last week, is that it shouldn't be a situation where we just keep putting it off. Is that, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his example is that if he would remember that he has something to give in charity, he would rush to do it. There's one narration where it mentions is that he was leading the salat, and then after the salat was over, he had quickly got up and went to his home, went inside, and then came back out. And the Sahaba were surprised that he did this. And so when he came back out and they asked him, what was so important, like, well, why was he rushing? The Prophet ﷺ had mentioned is that he had remembered that he left some dinars or dirhams in his house, and that he wanted to get it and give it out in charity, as soon as possible. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he's teaching us this aspect of hastening to do good works. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about this aspect in the Quran, in the aspect of the people who they compete with one another in the doing of good works. Is that when it comes to doing good works, because what is this all for? All of this is to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we mentioned before, we don't worship. We don't do worship just for worship's sake. We do worship because that is the means of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we said, that when we get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that should be our sufficiency. That is going to be what brings tranquility to our hearts, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's not bound by contingency. And this is why we said that nothing in this dunya is going to actually bring solace or contentment to our heart. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be able to do that. Because everything else that's in the world that we know that exists is something that's contingent. We can't hold on to it forever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only thing that we can have where time, space, place, circumstance, none of that matters. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the aspect of remembering Him. He says, الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا عَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ. That those who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala standing, sitting, and lying on their sides. That there's no situation where a person cannot be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why when some of the righteous were thrown in prison, they would, people would say about them that they have the opportunity to be in khalwa. That this is just opportunity for them to have a spiritual retreat with their Lord. Because why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not bound by prison. For example, like I used to work in a prison. So one of the things is that they say about prison is that it not only affects the person that's in prison, but also affects their families. Why? Because their families aren't able to access them. But the person that is in prison, and even for the family members of those who are in prison, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound by the prison. So you can still be with your Lord no matter what your situation is. Just think about Yunus alayhi salam. Yunus alayhi salam was still with his Lord even in the belly of a well. And I don't think any of us are going to ever come close to anything like that. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who take true value of our time, and that we never miss out on those things that we can by His permission, by His grace. When Taraweeh is in progress and a person misses the 2 rakahs of 10 for some reason, they go to the restroom or something like that, at the end of 10 and 3 for witr, do they need to make up the 2? So I believe, Taraweeh, generally speaking, is either going to be prayed in 8 or 20 rakahs. And I say that just because there is an opinion that says 8 rakahs. However, if you actually go to the 4 schools of law, they all say a minimum 20 is how you complete the sunnah of Taraweeh. Like in the Shafi school, anything that you pray beyond Isha and the 2 rakahs after Isha, which are meaning the sunnah rakahs after Isha, the 2 rakahs, anything that you pray beyond that will be counted towards a Taraweeh, and inshallah you will be rewarded for your intention and in that action that you did. But the basis is that to complete the fullness of the sunnah will be to pray 20. However, some people have interpreted a particular hadith related by Aisha radiallahu anha, and they've reduced Taraweeh to 8. So I'm not going to get into like the fiqh back and forth about that. So in any case, people generally speaking pray 8 or 20. So if a person has the intention that they're going to either pray 8 or 20 raka'ahs of Taraweeh, if they miss some of the raka'ahs behind the imam, then yes, they should make up those raka'ahs before praying witr. So if I'm praying behind someone and they're praying 20 raka'ahs and I miss 2 or 4 rakahs or whatever case may be, that I should make those up. So what you can do is that, generally speaking, part of Taraweeh is that you take a break between every 4 rakahs. And so, for example, in between those breaks, then you would just stand up and briefly pray 2 rakahs, so that you would have completed either the 8 or the 20 rakahs that you intend to pray. During the last 10 in Taraweeh in the congregation prayer, each time when the Imam recites Al-Fatiha, we pause a little bit. Wanted to know if this is a time for us to make a quick dua before he continues the next verse. So, generally speaking, when the Imam is reciting, is that this is not a time for particularly the muqtadi to make dua or anything else. So for example, in the Hanafi school, it's much more restricted, so that when the Imam is reciting, the only thing that you would say behind him is Ameen. However, in the Shafi school, that after the Imam recites the Fatiha, then you would recite the Fatiha after the Imam, but you would try to do it quickly, so that when he starts reciting again, meaning a surah after the Fatiha, that you would be silent in that time. And the Shafi school is considered to be a sunnah for the Imam to pause for a little bit before reciting a chapter after the Fatiha, so that the followers can recite the Fatiha themselves. This is just a fiqh difference between the Shafi school and the Hanafi school. So this is not necessarily going to be the time to make dua. However, the best time to make dua in the salah, and this is particular from the standpoint of precaution, is that if you know how to say a dua in Arabic, then the best time to do it in the prayer itself is in sujood. And so after saying the recommended supplication, Subhana Rabbil A'la, Subhana Rabbil A'la, Subhana Rabbil A'la, if a person knows how to say a particular dua that they want to say in Arabic, then the best time to say it is while you're in sujood. If you don't know how to say it in Arabic, then you can keep silent, but say it in your heart in whatever language you're comfortable with. But don't say it on the tongue if you don't know how to say it in Arabic. And then after prayer, of course, you can say dua in any language that you wish. But in general, the most precautionary position is that only Arabic is allowed to be said in the prayer. And then, even still, if you want to add like an additional safety net, is that, for example, in the Hanafi school, they mention that any dua that you do say in the prayer cannot be a dua that the creation can give you. Meaning, like, for example, you wouldn't say in the prayer a dua like, Rabbi atini zawjan. Or not, or so I say, Rabbi atini, Rabbi, Rabbini zawajni fulana. Oh Allah, marry me to fulana. And the reason why that is because, for example, you can ask her father or whoever her guardian is for her marriage, meaning that someone in creation could do that. So in the Hanafi school, they would say that any dua that you do say, not only should it be in Arabic, but it should also be something that only Allah can grant you. So you ask something like, Rabbi zidni ilman, oh Allah, increase me in knowledge, or Rabbik filli wali walidayya, oh Lord, oh Allah, oh my Lord, forgive me and my parents, these type of things. Hello, I wanted to know what would be the steps I need to become a Muslim. The basis of being a Muslim is just, so there's two aspects to being a Muslim. One is the aspect of being a Muslim in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other is the recognition of being a Muslim within the Muslim community. So being a Muslim in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is nothing more than you actually just believing in the tenets of Islam. And so that means that if a person believes within their heart that there is no God but the necessary being Allah, and that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his messenger, and they believe in all the other messengers that came before him, then in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that person is Muslim. Now, in order for that person to be recognized as a Muslim amongst the Muslim community, then the only thing that they have to do is just verbally bear witness to that, which is called taking their shahada. And so it's nothing more than saying the kalima, as we would say in Arabic, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Like, that's the basic bare minimum that a person will say, which means that I bear witness that there's no God except for Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And so there's nothing, and it's recommended that a person, once they come to have that conviction, that they hasten to take their shahada. And yeah, a person does not need to know how to say this in Arabic. Traditionally, from the standpoint of tradition, oftentimes a person will be coached to say it in Arabic just for the blessing of that saying, because that's the exact way the Prophet ﷺ would say it. However, even if a person said it in their own mother tongue, English, Spanish, Chinese, whatever, it still will be considered to be valid. Because again, the basis of it is, more importantly, what is the relationship in your heart? Because a person can say the shahada and it actually not be true. Like, a person can take the shahada and not actually believe in it. So that, so saying it is only from the standpoint of the Muslim community that we know, that because there are certain rights that will be taking place. So a person that's Muslim is also to receive zakat, that they're buried in a certain way, there's certain marriage procedures and so on and so forth. And so, but the recommendation is that if a person is firm in that, is that they don't hasten to do it, but that they do it, as soon as possible. And so, that's the basis of it. And so, if a person already believes that, in the sight of Allah, that person is already Muslim. And the saying of the shahada is just so that the Muslim community, we can confirm that person's Islam. And so, as Sister Mina was mentioning, is that, even if you wanted to take your shahada right now, we could do it right now. And so that's the basis of becoming Muslim. And so for people wanting for the children or other family members to become Muslim, the the recommendation is that, especially for mothers and fathers, is to make a lot of dua for them. That the dua of the parents for the children is accepted. And this is why we're warned as parents to never make dua against your children. That, no matter how much they may annoy you or get on your nerves or whatever the case may be, never make dua against your children. That if anything, from amongst the righteous, that when their children got them upset, they actually used to make dua for them. So like if your children get you upset, make dua for them. Say, may Allah make you of the awliya. It actually mentions that one of the imams at the Haram in Mecca, his mother, when she used to get mad at him, used to say to him, may Allah make you an imam at the Kaaba. And lo and behold, he's one of the imams at the Kaaba. So I'm being told that Sister Kier, did you want to take your Shahada now?
Yes.
Okay. And so, I mean, usually just to make sure, beforehand, we always ask, if there are any questions or anything that you feel needs to be further explained before taking your Shahada.
No, not really.
Okay. And so, as I mentioned, traditionally, the tradition is that you would say it in Arabic, and so I'll walk you through the saying in Arabic, but then we'll say it in English so that it's understood what is being said.
Okay.
So you could just repeat after. Ashhadu
Ashhadu
alla
alla
ilaha
ilaha
illallah
illaha
wa ashhadu
wa shahadu
anna
anna
Muhammadan
Muhammadan
Rasulullah.
Rasulullah.
I bear witness
I bear witness
that there is no God
that there is no God
except Allah,
except Allah,
and I bear witness
and I bear witness
that Muhammad
that Muhammad
is his messenger.
is his messenger.
So congratulations. And so, this is a confirmation of what was already in your heart. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and make things easy for you. And if we were in person, you would probably have a lot of sisters giving you a hug right now. But as much as we can, please feel free to reach out so that we can assist you, and know that at this point you are the best from among us, because once a person becomes Muslim, all their prior sins are forgiven. The only exception to that is that if a person has debts that they owe to other people, if they've wronged other people, those things still need to be rectified. Those things need to be repaid and given back. But other than that, all of your other previous sins are forgiven. And so we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep you in this state and make you firm upon Iman until the last day. And may He make it easy for you and to continue to increase you in good.
Thank you.
And Amber, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you in regards to the family. As I say to many people, is that generally speaking, our biggest test will always come from our family. And the reason why that is because those are the people who we generally speaking have the strongest heartfelt connection to. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy. And so one of the things that we have seen over the years, and it's not to say that there's something that's going to necessarily be immediate, but what we have seen is that generally speaking is that if we take the prophetic advice, خَلَقَ النَّاسِ بِخُلَقٍ حَسَنٍ, that if we treat people with excellent character, with beautiful character, that is one of the greatest ways to soften people's hearts. And so, whatever that may be, whether it be giving them gifts, smiling in their face, speaking well about them, generally speaking, like even for many people that become Muslim, many people don't become Muslim necessarily because of something they read or a convincing argument, but a lot of times people become Muslim just because of the treatment that they receive from other Muslims. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you as well. And again, any of you, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I agree with you. I feel like once like family sees a change in me, it'll make them want to follow in my footsteps. Although like I'm not forcing anyone to convert, I feel like this is the right thing for me. I've tried Christianity and I feel like it was still chaotic and confusing. But with Islam and like transitioning to Muslim, it's like I found peace already and I feel like this is natural and like I was made like this is meant for me. Like this faith is meant for me and I want my kids to follow my footsteps, and go down the right path in life. So at this point I don't care. Like my aunt she's the one that I've been receiving backlash from. She mentored me temporarily. But I told her I'm like, if you're not okay with my faith then just move out because I'm not gonna she's not gonna make me choose between Allah and her because my decision will be Allah. No question that. Like,
And may Allah make it easy for you, and may He give you good and keep you firm. And as we mentioned, through years of different types of experiences, that generally speaking, especially with family, if we just have patience with them and treat them well, is that generally speaking they come around. Is that it may take some time. Like I'm not gonna lie and say that it's gonna necessarily happen overnight or anything like that. But generally speaking, over time, when we are patient with them and we show them good akhlaq and good characteristics and kindness, is that eventually they come around. And inshallah that will be the same for your family, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy and give you all good in this life and the next. And so again, inshallah, I know we've gone a little bit over, but inshallah it was all worth it, because to be witness, in particular of someone becoming Muslim and to be of assistance to others, these are some of the greatest things that we can be a part of in this life. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again bless all of you and may He make things easy. Just a quick practical reminder, remember that your clocks are going to be, for those of us in the US, outside of like the one state or one city that doesn't do it, but for the rest of us, the clocks are going to be changing, so just make sure that you're aware of that for suhoor and your fast. I mean, at worst, most of our clocks are probably automatic, they'll change by themselves anyway, but at worst, you'll just be an hour early for suhoor. So it's not as if it's like the other way around, like in the wintertime when the clocks go back an hour. So, but, so at worst, but, for the actual Salat al-Fajr, that's going to be a different story. Like you want to make sure that you're praying Salat al-Fajr in its proper time. So this is just a reminder to kind of prepare for that, inshallah. We do Zoom meetings. So the Mecca Center, we have classes throughout the year on different topics of Islam. And so those are more formal classes, which are on the weekends usually, and they're usually 4 weeks at a time. But then we also have what we call Living Islam gathering that we do once a month, which is just an open forum that people can come to and talk about those things that they may feel that they haven't gotten the chance to talk about or they don't have the space to talk about. So we do that once a month, usually the third Saturday of the month, but because of Ramadan, we're just not doing it this month. But yes, in the month of Ramadan specifically, we will have daily Ramadan reminders. And so I usually do it on the weekends, and then you have others of the teachers that do it throughout the week. And so we try to provide service to the community as much as possible. So inshallah we will leave you all in Allah's care. And again, Jazakallahu khairan for joining us, and Jazakallahu khair for Sister Kier. Please forgive me if I didn't pronounce it right. But still, thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of this blessed time and being willing to share it with us. So inshallah, we will stop here and we will leave you all in Allah's care. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم وحسبنا ونعم الوكيل. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.